My parents always told me family was everything, but the night everything came crashing down proved otherwise. When I finally stood up and spoke my truth at that gathering, it wasn't just about me. It was about breaking free from years of being overshadowed, overlooked, and underestimated. My name's Madison Clark, I'm 31, and what you're about to hear is the story of how I stopped living in someone else's shadow and started owning my own life. Before we get started, where are you tuning in from? Are you in the middle of the morning rush or on a late-night drive? Drop a comment below. You're about to hear everything that happened after I made the choice that changed everything. Growing up in the suburbs of Chicago, our family always looked like the picture of success. A comfortable home, family dinners filled with laughter, and parents who seemed proud of their 2 kids. But beneath that polished surface, things were far from perfect. I'm the younger sibling, and my older brother Dylan has always been the star of the show. Everyone loves to talk about Dylan, the ambitious one, the overachiever, the golden child, who seemingly could do no wrong. Dylan was the kid who graduated from a top-tier university, landed a prestigious job at the family business, and somehow always had a perfect smile for the cameras at every family event. He had the confidence, the charm, and the favor of our parents. As for me, well, I quietly carved out my own path as a graphic designer, loving the creative freedom but never quite feeling like I measured up. At every family function, I'd watch Dylan get praised for his achievements, while my work was met with polite nods or barely concealed disappointment. I remember the way my mom's smile would falter ever so slightly whenever I brought up my latest project, or the way my dad would steer conversations back to Dylan's successes. It wasn't malicious. At least I didn't think so. It was just the way things were. Dylan was the future of the family, the one who carried the legacy. I was, well, the quiet one who didn't fit the mold. School was a battleground for approval, too. While Dylan excelled academically and athletically, I was the kid who loved art and design, passions my parents never really understood. "Why aren't you focusing on something practical?" they'd ask. "Design won't get you far." Their expectations hung over me like a shadow, making me question my worth at every turn. But I refused to let their narrow definitions dictate my happiness. I worked hard, built my career, and found joy in my work. Still, the sting of being constantly compared to Dylan never quite went away. Even with a growing client list and freelance projects, I felt invisible in my own family's story. I didn't realize how much this affected me until my late 20s, when the pressure to conform became suffocating. Invitations to family events felt like tests I wasn't sure I could pass. I'd rehearse conversations, trying to sound accomplished, hoping for genuine interest, but often getting the same dismissive remarks. It was exhausting. And deep down, I wondered if they even saw me, or just the role I was supposed to play. It wasn't until the last family gathering, the one where everything finally unraveled, that I understood how much this invisibility had shaped my life. That night, I made a choice to confront the pain, the favoritism, and the silence. It was the moment I realized that if I didn't speak up, I'd spend forever chasing a version of love and acceptance that was never meant for me. This story isn't just about sibling rivalry or parental expectations. It's about the complex ways families shape us, the quiet battles for recognition, and the courage it takes to break free and redefine what family really means. And trust me, it's been a journey filled with heartache, revelations, and ultimately, healing. So, buckle up and join me as I take you through the moments that led to that confrontation, the secrets that surfaced, and the unexpected path toward a family that finally feels like mine. Dylan's success was like a constant echo in our household, always loud, always impossible to escape. Growing up, he was the kid who never had to try too hard, the kind who made everything look effortless. From a young age, he was the golden boy who excelled in school, sports, and social circles. Our parents, especially Dad, held him up as the example of what we were supposed to strive for. If Dylan was the shining star, I was the one who struggled to catch any light. In elementary school, I remember Dylan was the kid who got awards for football and science fairs. Meanwhile, I was the girl with messy sketches and daydreams about art school. Our parents would come to every one of his games, clapping and cheering loudly, but when it came to my school plays or art exhibitions, their support was polite but lukewarm. I could see the difference, even at 8 years old. It stung. High school was no different. Dylan played varsity football and kept his grades near the top of the class. He joined clubs that mattered in our community, always in leadership roles. His future seemed mapped out perfectly: college, the family business, marriage to someone from the right circles. He fit every checkbox our parents had on their list. I, on the other hand, was quieter, less noticed. I loved graphic design and spent hours creating digital art, but I wasn't the star athlete or the class president. I worked hard to maintain good grades, but whenever I brought home a report card or shared my portfolio, it was met with a nod and a sigh, as if my efforts were nice but never quite enough. My parents would often say things like, "You need to focus on something more practical," or "Your brother is building a real future." Their words weren't cruel, but the message was clear. Dylan's path was the one that mattered, and I was veering dangerously off course. At family dinners, Dylan was the center of attention. Stories of his achievements were shared proudly with relatives and family friends. His college acceptance letters, scholarships, and internships were proudly displayed on the refrigerator. I could feel myself shrinking in comparison, a silent observer in my own family's narrative. It wasn't just my parents. Even extended family played into this. Aunts and uncles would ask about Dylan's latest accomplishments, while my own successes were glossed over or redirected. It was as if the family had agreed on an unspoken hierarchy, Dylan at the top and the rest of us trailing behind. Yet despite this, Dylan wasn't perfect. Beneath his confident exterior, I caught glimpses of his struggles, anxiety that sometimes made him withdraw or lash out, pressures he rarely spoke about. Our parents tried to shield those from us, insisting everything was fine. I saw it in quiet moments when Dylan's smile faltered, or he paced the halls late at night, but no one talked about it openly. For years, I carried a complicated mix of admiration, jealousy, and resentment. I wanted to be proud of my brother, and in many ways, I was. But I also wanted to be seen for who I was, not just as Dylan's sister, or the one who didn't fit the mold. As I built my career in graphic design, I worked hard to create a life that felt authentic. I loved the creativity and freedom my work offered, but I also craved validation. Sometimes that craving felt tied directly to the family expectations I was trying to escape. Would my parents ever truly see me? Or was I doomed to live in Dylan's shadow forever? In college, I tried to find my own identity even further away from home. I studied hard, took on freelance projects, and moved to Chicago to pursue opportunities. The distance helped, but it also made family gatherings more stressful. I'd return home only to feel the same old comparisons and judgments waiting for me. Dylan seemed to navigate the family's expectations with ease. He smiled and played his part, basking in the praise. I felt like an outsider, trying to prove that my choices were just as valid, even if they weren't the traditional path. I remember one particular family reunion where Dylan was celebrated for landing a big promotion at the family business. Everyone was thrilled for him, and rightfully so. But when I shared news about a major design contract I'd secured, the reaction was polite but muted. My accomplishments were acknowledged, but never celebrated with the same enthusiasm. Those moments piled up, creating a quiet tension I couldn't shake. I began to question my own worth, wondering if I was chasing approval that would never come. The invisible line between us, marked by expectations, comparisons, and unspoken rules, felt impossible to cross. Yet, beneath it all, I knew my love for my family was real. I didn't want to tear us apart. I wanted us to see each other, to understand the struggles and strengths we all carried. I hoped for a moment when I could finally be recognized as Madison Clark, not just Dylan's sister. That hope was the fragile thread that held me together until the night I decided to confront everything. It was the night I stopped being silent, stopped shrinking, and finally demanded to be seen. The tension between Dylan and me had been simmering for years, but it finally boiled over at our latest family gathering, the one I'll never forget. What started as polite conversations and forced smiles quickly spiraled into something raw and real. It was the moment I'd been dreading and, in a way, anticipating, when all the unspoken frustrations and unfair comparisons came crashing out in the open. The reunion was held at our parents' home, a spacious house in the suburbs where so many of our childhood memories were made and broken. As usual, Dylan arrived with confidence, dressed sharp, and ready to charm everyone. Our parents greeted him with genuine warmth, the kind reserved for a son who fits the mold perfectly. When I walked in, my presence was acknowledged with polite nods, but there was a clear difference in the energy. Throughout the evening, Dylan effortlessly commanded attention. He shared stories about his work at the family business, the new projects he was leading, and the connections he was making. Family friends and relatives laughed and hung on every word. I tried to join in, talking about a recent design campaign I'd launched that had received praise from a big client. The reaction was polite, but you could feel the difference. My accomplishments were quietly overlooked. That's when the frustration inside me finally erupted. I couldn't stay silent anymore. During a lull in the conversation, I turned to my parents and said, "Why is it that Dylan's successes are always celebrated, but mine are barely noticed? I've worked just as hard, but I'm treated like I'm less important. Why is my path less valid?" The room fell silent. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, and Dylan's expression tightened. I saw a flicker of something I hadn't seen before. Maybe surprise, maybe guilt, or maybe just frustration. My voice trembled slightly, but I pressed on. It feels like there's a double standard, like I'm expected to fit into a mold that doesn't fit me, while Dylan gets to be the golden child. My mom tried to interject softly, but I stopped her. I need honesty. Why is there favoritism? Why do I feel invisible in my own family? That's when my mom did something unexpected. She took a deep breath and shared a secret she'd been holding for years. She told us that Dylan had struggled with anxiety growing up, something our parents had tried to protect us from, hoping it wouldn't affect how we saw him. She explained how those struggles shaped his behavior, his need for approval, and why he sometimes seemed distant or harsh. Hearing this changed the tone of the evening. Suddenly, the perfect image of Dylan I'd held in my mind started to crack. He wasn't just the flawless golden child. He was a person with his own battles. My parents admitted they'd tried to keep the peace by focusing on Dylan's successes, perhaps at the expense of being fully present for me. For the first time, I saw a new side of our family dynamic, one complicated by fear, misunderstanding, and a desire to protect, but ultimately causing pain. The favoritism wasn't just about ignoring me. It was tangled up in the struggles none of us had fully acknowledged. Dylan and I sat down later, away from the crowd, and talked, really talked, for the first time in years. We shared fears and frustrations, vulnerabilities we'd both kept hidden. He confessed he sometimes felt trapped by the expectations placed on him, and I admitted how invisible I'd felt trying to forge my own way. It wasn't a magical fix, but it was a start. That night cracked open the walls of silence and misunderstanding that had divided us for so long. We realized that our conflict wasn't about competition or resentment, but about being heard and seen. That family gathering marked a turning point, the beginning of real conversations instead of surface-level pleasantries. It was messy and uncomfortable, but it was real. And it made me realize that families aren't perfect, and they're rarely simple. But when we're brave enough to confront our pain and share our truths, healing can begin. I left that night with a new sense of hope. Maybe we could rebuild the bridges that had been broken, not by denying our differences, but by embracing them honestly. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, I felt like we were moving in the right direction, together. After that evening's raw and honest conversations, The air between Dylan and me felt different, lighter, though still tentative. It was as if a door had been cracked open, allowing glimpses of understanding where there had only been silence before. But the real turning point came days later, when Mom sat me down for a heart-to-heart that peeled back layers of our family's history I'd never known. She began by sharing memories from years ago, before either of us were born. Dylan's struggles with anxiety had been a quiet, persistent shadow over the family, something they had tried to shield us from to protect his image. "He needed extra care," she said softly, "and sometimes, in trying to protect one child, I failed the other." Her words hit me harder than I expected. The favoritism I'd felt wasn't born from malice, but from a complicated mixture of love, fear, and protection that had never been fully explained to me. That moment made me realize how much we all carried invisible burdens: the parents, Dylan, and even myself. We were each trapped by expectations and roles shaped by years of unspoken rules and misunderstandings. Suddenly, the family dynamic that had once felt so rigid began to soften in my mind, revealing the human imperfections beneath. Motivated by this newfound perspective, Dylan and I agreed to seek help outside our family. We signed up for family counseling. It wasn't easy to admit we needed it, but both of us recognized that the patterns of favoritism and misunderstanding wouldn't simply fix themselves. Therapy became a space where we could speak freely, without judgment or old baggage clouding the conversation. Over weeks and months, the sessions peeled back years of resentment and unmet expectations. We learned to listen in ways we hadn't before, hearing not just words, but the emotions underneath. Dylan opened up about his anxiety, the pressure he felt to be perfect, and how that shaped his behavior toward me and others. I shared my feelings of invisibility and my struggle to define my worth beyond the family's narrow expectations. Our parents also joined some sessions, gaining insight into how their attempts to protect and guide had inadvertently created distance and pain. We all learned that love isn't always expressed in perfect ways, but with effort and honesty, it can grow stronger. The counseling didn't erase our past, but it gave us tools to rebuild trust and respect. Slowly, family gatherings began to feel less like performances and more like genuine connections. The hierarchy softened, making space for each of us to be seen and valued for who we truly were. At work, I felt the changes too. As my family healed, I stopped measuring my success by their approval. I found joy in my creative projects and pride in my achievements simply for what they were. Accomplishments I earned through passion and dedication, not just attempts to prove something to others. Dylan and I developed a real partnership, supporting each other in ways we never had before. The rivalry faded, replaced by a sibling bond rooted in understanding and mutual respect. We celebrated each other's wins, big and small, without comparison or judgment. Through this journey, I also reconnected with my parents in a more honest way. They shared their own regrets and hopes for the future, and I learned to forgive the mistakes born from love's complexity. Our family didn't become perfect overnight, but we embraced our imperfections and committed to growing together. The experience taught me something profound. Family isn't defined by flawless relationships or rigid roles. It's about seeing each other, the strengths, the struggles, the humanity beneath the surface, and choosing connection even when it's hard. Healing happens in the messy, imperfect moments where vulnerability meets empathy. Now, when I look back at that night of confrontation, I see it not as an end, but a beginning, a turning point that allowed us to rewrite our story, not as a tale of favoritism and pain, but as one of growth, forgiveness, and love that adapts and deepens over time. This new foundation didn't erase our past wounds, but it gave us the strength to move forward. Together, imperfect but hopeful. The months following our decision to seek family counseling marked a turning point not only in our relationships, but in how I saw myself. For the first time, I began to truly feel seen and accepted, not as Dylan's sister or a quiet kid who didn't fit the mold, but as Madison Clark, with her own strengths, flaws, and dreams. Family gatherings, which once felt like a minefield of comparison and silent judgment, slowly transformed into opportunities for genuine connection. Dylan and I found ourselves sharing laughs, memories, and even vulnerabilities without the usual undercurrent of competition. It wasn't perfect. Old habits and unspoken tensions would sometimes resurface, but now we had a foundation to build on, one grounded in respect and openness. One of the most profound changes was learning to celebrate each other's successes without comparison or resentment. Dylan cheered me on when I landed a major client for my design firm, and I made a point to be genuinely proud of his new business ventures without feeling overshadowed. We realized that our achievements didn't have to compete. They could coexist, enriching our family's story rather than dividing it. My relationship with our parents also deepened. Through honest conversations in therapy and beyond, we unpacked years of expectations and misunderstandings. They apologized for their unintentional favoritism, explaining how fear and protection shaped their choices. I learned to forgive, not to erase the past, but to free myself from its grip. They in turn made efforts to support me on my own terms, celebrating who I am rather than who they hoped I'd be. Perhaps most importantly, I found peace within myself. The need for external validation, once so urgent, began to fade. I stopped measuring my worth by how others perceived me and started valuing my accomplishments and happiness for their own sake. That shift freed me to pursue my passions wholeheartedly and live authentically. Dylan and I also grew closer as siblings and friends. We began creating new traditions, weekend hikes, design brainstorming sessions, even collaborating on a charity project, combining his business expertise and my creative skills. These moments, small but meaningful, helped heal wounds and build a lasting bond. Our family still faced challenges, as all families do. But now, when tensions arose, we addressed them openly rather than letting resentment simmer. The therapy sessions gave us tools to communicate better, listen deeper, and respect differences. Looking back, I realize how much I'd carried the weight of silent expectations and comparisons. Letting go of that burden was a gradual process, made possible by courage, honesty, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. The journey wasn't linear or easy, but it was worth every step. Today, I feel grateful for the imperfect yet genuine family we're becoming. Our story isn't about perfection or flawless roles. It's about embracing who we are and choosing connection despite the messiness of human relationships. So, what about you? Have you ever had to confront family dynamics that left you feeling unseen or overshadowed? How did you find your voice and claim your place? We'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. If you're into real-life family drama like this, make sure to subscribe for more.